Hey everybody, my name is Garrett Fuller. I am here with Team Critical Hit and Reed Pop to talk about going from AAA to indie. And we're really lucky today to have two of the best game designers I know, two of the best producers, and two guys who have literally worked with everybody in the game industry that you could possibly name at one time or another. Um, so it's fantastic. I will let you guys do introductions really quickly, and then we'll go into some of the history of what games you've worked on for those who may not know, and then talk about your experiences in the AAA environment and transitioning to the indie environment. So, Gordon, why don't we start with you, Gordon Walton from Artcraft and working on Crowfall. Go ahead, Gordon. I'll let you give your resume real quick.
Well, howdy. Yeah, we don't have that kind of time. I'm an old game guy. This is my 43rd year of making games professionally. So I've worked on games from cassette to big MMORPGs. Before starting Artcraft with my partner J. Todd Coleman, I'd worked in big companies for 20 years. Worked for Origin, worked for Maxis, worked for Sony Online, worked for BioWare, and finally Disney before moving to this. So, I've worked on all different kinds of games, but in the last 25 years, I've tried to focus on the MMO genre because it's the hardest thing to do, and I like doing hard things. Hard things kind of try to keep me young, is what I think. Either that or they'll kill me eventually. I'm not sure which is going to happen.
That's great. Excellent. And that was great, Gordon. Thanks. David, Dave Brevik, I'll let you give your resume, Dave, as well. So, for those who don't
All
know, go
right.
ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I've been in the industry about only 30 years, and I was president of Blizzard North, and made Diablo and Diablo 2, and then was chief visionary officer at Flagship Studios and made Hellgate London, and then was CEO of Gazillion and made Marvel Heroes. And now I am president of my own independent game company called Graybeard Games, as well as I am president of Skystone Games, a publisher.
Awesome, awesome. So I mean, those resumes are forget it. I give up. And Gordon, I was young when you started making games, but I'm old enough to remember playing games on cassette. So that was a big deal, right? And Dave, obviously, Diablo 1 and 2 were close to a lot of people's hearts, as a lot of the games, Gordon, you worked on, I know, with Star Wars and everything. So it's been exciting. But let's so I think that was a good past history from both of you guys. I want to talk a little bit about the AAA type of publishing world that exists. And obviously, this world has changed over the years, but I know both of you guys are very tuned in and see it all the time. So starting with you, Gordon, maybe talk about some of the advantages that you had working on AAA games and some of the bigger titles you've worked on. And what were the things that were actually positive for you in
Well,
that world?
context is everything, right? So the context of a bigger company, um, you have infinitely more resources to throw at stuff. You have infinitely more politics to get those resources, uh, aligned up. You have a lot of process that's already there that's going to, in some ways, help you and in some ways slow you down, particularly if you're trying to do new things. It's very difficult sometimes to change a company culture. Is like breaking a bone and resetting it, and nobody likes it. Nobody wants it to happen, and it's very, very difficult. So I've been making games that weren't, except for Sony Online, all the other companies I worked for were not online companies, and trying to make online games inside of not online companies very, very challenging because you're trying to change their mode of operating. It's very difficult. The best parts are, can have a lot of support. You can get a lot of support, and you can get a lot more resource applied at stuff. Over my career, I've watched, us go from, somewhere between 30 and 60 major publishers to six. Is where we're kind of at, right? The consolidation's a big deal.
Yeah.
So those are the positives, right? The negatives are easy, right? The big companies don't like taking big risks. And frankly, in our business, if you're not taking big risk, you probably aren't going to stand out, which means you're going to have mediocre results. So it's very challenging to kind of match what works with cultures. of larger companies, because they're mostly playing defense. They're trying to figure out, okay, how do we not lose where we're at versus how are we going to gamble and get even bigger.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. David, I definitely, you can expound on this too and talk about your experiences with Blizzard North and some of the bigger titles you worked on and what it was like to work in that environment as well.
Well, I think that in a lot of ways, again, there are advantages and disadvantages. The advantages are more resources. I think that also a big advantage is that you're going to get attention on your product, that the kind of news sites and magazines and things like that. I mean, when there were magazines, they they would pay attention to you, and that is going to generate a lot of hype and a lot of expectations, which can be good and bad. But your game will get noticed, and that is more and more important these days than anything. And so, having a big production and having kind of that cutting edge game like that, I think can bring about a lot of positive results financially, just from expectation alone. So it isn't maybe quite as risky as indie stuff, especially nowadays. If you're going to make a big product, there's at least going to be some audience for it, as long as it's not a complete disaster. And so I think that can be a big advantage.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. You started to go into some of the challenges about working in AAA environments, and Gordon, I'll come back to you for this. Can you identify kind of a challenge or a story that you went through that, without naming names, obviously, or anything like that, but something that you found really difficult in terms of design mechanics and getting ideas across, especially with MMOs? I know it's like driving the Titanic into a meteor storm. What's a challenge that you really face that you can focus in on in that environment of working with these big products? Gordon, go.
Gordon, go. I wasn't sure. I thought I was going.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was directed at you. First, I'll go back to you, and then we'll go back to David.
So frankly, the design challenges are not that significant. I don't think. I think that they're real. They're not. It's not like they're not real. The operational challenges tend to be more where you get hung up. Like, how do we actually coordinate? So I worked on Star Wars: The Old Republic. And we had 500 people in the building working on it, and another probably 300 or 400 outside the building. Just trying to get everybody to row in the same direction is often the biggest challenge. Players love these games, and they love, looking at, look at all the stuff that's in this game. Well, all that stuff took, literally thousands and thousands of man hours coordinated between multiple people to make it happen. And I think that's where I've seen the biggest challenges tend to be about, how do you actually get everyone to row in the same direction and actually build the same product when they can't play it yet? Because, once you start playing your product as a team, you kind of know what the game is, and it's a lot easier to communicate that stuff. But having it made, it's very difficult. Now, the design stuff I don't want to trivialize, but, particularly doing risky design stuff where you can't analogize it to something that's super successful is really pushing a boulder uphill in a big company. Because they're going, hey, we don't want to, we're already risking way too much money on this thing. And you're telling us, hey, to roll the dice a little bit more. It's very difficult sometimes to get anything innovative into a game. You can do combinatory innovation, but doing like real raw innovation, good luck in a big company, because everybody's going to be naysaying you all the way to the finish line.
No, it makes perfect sense. I could totally see the frustrations in it. David, what about you? What about your experiences with something like either Diablo or even like Marvel Heroes, which had a great run, and you moving into that environment of CEO? What's a challenge that really stands out to you, or like Gordon said, if there's a few cases?
Yeah, I think that, Gordon's right here, that the biggest thing is communication. As a team increases in size, trying to get your vision down to individual people about what it is that you're trying to do or accomplish, not only is a giant political battle, but also is, it's difficult to communicate. And you can communicate the same thing over and over, but it's like the old telephone games when you would go around the room and you tell the same story to 20 different people, you're going to get a different version of that story from every one of those 20 different people. And so, trying to get everybody on the same page to do something as teams become larger and larger, communication just becomes paramount. And it's really difficult to make sure that everybody understands what they're doing and why it's going on, and what you're trying to accomplish. And as well as it just becomes, in a lot of ways, just like this bloated thing where there's just so much overhead in communication and lots of producers and meetings and things like that, and documents and stuff that just become this kind of overwhelming amount of information that you need to deal with and manage and make sure that people are caught up on and communicating. So I think that's probably one of the biggest disadvantages, and it inhibits things like innovation and things like that, because it's just really difficult to, especially if you're going to innovate, do something completely crazy or different than anything that's ever been done before. Nobody has anything to compare it to. Nobody understands what you're trying to do. And when you're trying to communicate to 200 people something that nobody understands, but you have in your head, that's a very, very difficult thing to do. And so I think that those are at least a few of the challenges, but there's even more than that. I can think of even small examples, like when we first were making Diablo 1. Diablo 1 was kind of more of an indie-sized team, because it was like, we were about 20 or so people, which is pretty big at the time, but it's not, it's nothing today. We would be, hey, we want to do whatever. We're going to put a chest in the game. And so I would go talk to an artist, and they would, drop a chest, and then I would put it in the game, and it would take an afternoon or something like that. And now it's like on a big team, well, we want to put a chest in the game. Okay, well, first we're going to have to go get our concept artists to draw like 65 pictures of these things, of which one of these things are we going to do. And then it's got to go through this pipeline of like, okay, but the concept artist is backed up on, 4 other drawings or whatever. And then we get to that, and then that needs to go through to the modelers and the textures, and and then the sound department needs to add some stuff to it, and then the programmer who's backlog on something, and then it's like 2 weeks to get this chest in or whatever. So it's like it's much slower to do anything, as well as it's a lot more political, and a lot more because everybody wants to get involved. Everybody wants to put their mark on this big product, and they feel like and rightfully so, that you should give them a sense of ownership, and that they want that, they want to be part of this product, and want to, be really proud of what they're doing, which is great. And, but the more that you give the people that freedom to make those choices, the less clear the entire vision becomes. And so it's a tough balance to meet.
Yeah, for sure. I can only imagine. Like, so, I see these, poster boards of like chest after chest after chest after spear, sword, right?
It took me a long time to realize that, the talent of understanding, like to be able to look at a product in toto, like look at the whole thing and kind of know what fits and what doesn't, is not a very common talent. Mm. Everybody locally optimizes on a team. They go, hey, I want my thing to be the best thing. But in truth, the product needs to be a synthesis of all those things. And really, if something's quality level or the way it's done is so different than the rest of the game, then it looks like a bump, right? It looks like, okay, that's a seam in the Frankenstein sewing the thing together that you can see clearly, rather than it's a part of the integrated product. And great products feel like they flowed from one vision.
Yeah.
And it's very, very difficult in these large products to get them to feel that way, because so many people are adding nobody wants to just be, I'll do exactly what you told me. They want to do their best. And sometimes their best will make it look odd to the rest of the product. So getting into the style of the product and making sure that all the things flow together is actually a much less common attribute of game makers than I thought starting out in game making.
Huh, that's interesting. It's interesting to look at it from that angle, right? Because like you said, everybody gets excited, and I'm making, a chest for Diablo, or I'm putting in lightsabers for Star Wars. I can only imagine the level of passion that goes into it from a newer.
Well, yeah, and you don't really want to beat the crap out of them for doing, trying to do their best work,
Right.
right? It demotivates them, right? But at the
Yeah.
same time, how do you get them to understand that, this is how this fits into the whole picture is really, really important. Every little
Right.
piece of the game is like that. And, the people who creative direct them, are trying to get like it all to come out exactly right. And of course, people are people. People make mistakes. People have their own agendas. People are doing their things. We use a lot of people. So we're trying to do an orchestra, right? We're trying to get everybody to play their sheet music at exactly the right place and time. And when it's all together perfectly, it's awesome, right? But if one person says, hey, I'm going to freelance a little bit and be a half beat off, you really hear it really immediately,
Yeah.
right? Or, they stand up and start doing a solo in the middle of the thing. It's not going to work out, the overall presentation.
For sure. No, I think that's a really good comparison to the orchestra. I saw Dave laughing too.
Yeah, that was great.
It was really, really solid. So, going back in, and I think the big one, Gordon, you made the transition to being independent with Artcraft and with Crowfall, and it was a huge leap. I remember talking to you about it a couple of years ago when you started the project, and so I'm curious, what was the motivating factor to push you into an indie space? But then what was that journey like for you? Because I think it's a really good tale to tell developers for sure. So I'll start with you, and then David will go to you. Yep, go ahead.
I had kind of a weird career. So I started out independent. I did a lot of it. I had my own company multiple times, doing independent stuff, working for bigger companies, doing stuff directly. And then I went into kind of the corporate world, right? I started to work for 360 way back in the day, did Harpoon for them, left them and got out of the game business for a year or so, doing R&D stuff, and then came back in working for Konami. So suddenly I'm in the corporate world, right? I'm doing the corporate thing for a while. And, I was a developer, and then I was kind of a development manager and getting products, I learned how to be a salesperson. I learned all kinds of stuff that I didn't know how to do when I was a developer. But what in that journey, right? So, and then I, got the really big companies in super corporate world, executive producer and VP kind of level stuff. So all that's great, right? But then you get to the end of that and you're going, okay, one, I know too much. That's the real problem. You get to where you know too much, and a whole bunch of the opportunities that people put in front of you go, wait, I already know how that one's going to end, and it's not going to be pretty, right? Yeah, it sounds like an interesting product, but I can already read the tea leaves of how this project's going to go and what's wrong with this company and why they can't actually get it done, or if they do get it done, it's going to be a disaster. And I don't want to be involved in disasters, right? So when you know too much, you become less employable because you're going to be really picky about, who you're going to work with and what you're going to work on.
Sure.
And so going back to indie, I thought, okay, well, look, this is a interesting time, right? I've worked for a bunch of big companies. I know a bunch of stuff, but I've been an independent before. I need to go back to school and kind of learn how to do a startup and all that stuff. And I did that. And what we wanted to do, though, both Todd and myself, was we said, look, the kind of thing that we're thinking about doing is too crazy. Nobody will fund it. And that was true because we actually talked to some people about it. They go, no, that sounds like an awesome idea, but it'll never work. Okay, we're on to something. Everyone is telling us it can't work. So that means we're on to something is what we thought, because we knew that everybody was risk adverse, particularly for these big, giant, expensive projects. Right. So that's what drove me back to being independent. And yeah, was it challenging? Sure. I had to spend my own money for years, to do it, had to, take all the risk that goes with that. But that's part of the thing, right? If you're in the creative business, what you want to do is creative stuff. Now, I don't really create anything. I create teams that create things, right? My partner is really the creative guy, right? All I do is I get to create the context for cool shit to happen. Right? So, but that's, in my own evolution, that's where I've ended up, right? I'm in the place where I make teams that make things. I don't really get to make things. I get to touch tiny bits of it. But the truth is, the more I stick my finger in, the more I'm disempowering the people who are actually making the game, right? And these things are a synthesis of all that talent coming together to make something. It's not really, the vision may spring from one mind, but in the end, it's a synthesis of all that work. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really good. David, talk a little bit about going. Like you said, you were in Gazillion, and then you started Greybeard, built your own game again, and now with Skystone and coming in and looking at indie games and stuff like that. So, what was that journey like for you? Going, same as Gordon had mentioned, like from a corporate level and down into the, now you're back to looking at code, looking at designs, talking to teams. How was that experience for you?
Well, it's great. I'm really happy, but I think that when even towards the end of my career at Blizzard, and also at Gazillion, especially once I became CEO, your job isn't making games anymore, and your job is whatever, talking to investors all day, or dealing with an HR issue, or whatever, and you spend all of your time making sure that other people can make games. But for me personally, that isn't like what I wanted to do. Like I'm unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm not sure, good at that, and so I keep getting promoted into those roles, but that's not really my biggest passion. My biggest passion is actually being involved in game development. And so, when I was a kid, I didn't grow up in, hey, someday I want to be a CEO or something like that. That wasn't like the dream, right? The dream was, I want to make games, and I want to be involved in games. And if that means for me, the leaving as CEO and becoming basically just a one-person indie dev company is, I'm doing everything. I'm doing the programming, I'm doing the art, I'm doing the music, I'm doing. Now, I may have gone a little bit crazy. That may be a little bit overboard, and it's tough being your customer service and your programmer and your QA and your and your artist and things like that. But it's also very, very freeing and very liberating, because you can do what you want, and that's really exciting. And so I've enjoyed that, as well as now I'm really enjoying the Skystone thing, where I get to give a lot of feedback and help developers, not only through the process of whatever it is, putting it on a different platform, or making introductions to different groups, or giving them direct feedback on their game design, or whatever. I enjoy that process a lot too, which is what I've done that for my whole career. I gave feedback even from my very first jobs, where I was working in in a company where we had 2 projects going on. I would give feedback on other projects all the way through. And so now, it's kind of more of an official capacity, and I really enjoy that too. And it's more back to doing the things that I am passionate about. It's more about actually being involved in game development, and that's where my real passions lie, rather than just simply running companies.
Yeah, no. I mean, both you guys, makes perfect sense. It definitely is. It's critical stuff, and I know it's like you said. I think what speaks to me, and I'm sure Gordon, nobody grows up saying, "I really want to be CEO," right? Let's leave that.
Well, I'm
leave
sure
that
some people do. I mean, maybe that's somebody's passion. That's
it's like Wolf of Wall Street
really
people.
mine,
We don't talk to them unless we have to, right?
I don't know. Yeah, every sociopath and psychopath you ever met wanted to be that.
That's right, exactly. I'm gonna dovetail that into some of the early steps of things that I know every indie person out there, everybody who's building a game or has the game in their head and is trying to get it onto a screen goes through. And we'll go back to you, Gordon. Start with you, and David, I know you can speak heavily on it too. What's it like dealing with the investments / partnerships / team building? Like, those early first steps are so critical to a person trying to sit down and build their vision. What is some something that you experienced, or some ideas you have around that, is taking those first couple of steps to be brave enough to build your product?
Well, I think it's interesting because, in my mind, while this is no longer true, but, there is no such thing as a game investor. Really, really. So there are people who invest in stuff to make money, and they might happen to invest in games. But when you're approaching an investor, it's like approaching anybody that you want to sell something to. You better step back and get yourself in their shoes and go, what's motivating them? What do they want out of this relationship? How do I look like a good prospect to them? What are they after? And this is the hardest part for game makers, right? Because if you're passionate about game making, you're probably not passionate about entrepreneurship or starting a business or figuring out all the, most people who start a business in our business just kind of jump into it and then find out later that if I knew what I knew now, then I wouldn't have done that, right? This is hard, right? It's like saying, I'm going to be great at 8 things, but what I really want to do is games. But the problem is you have to be great at 8 other things to make games, right? To own a game company. So I think what I would tell any new, indie who wants to go make a game, if you can make it without any investment, do so. But then you're going to have to learn how to promote it and how to sell it and how to do all the other stuff regardless. Nobody's going to make a game. You can make a game all day long and toss it out in front of people and no one will ever find it, mostly, is what's going to happen. So if you can't get people to play it, why did you make it in the first place? Probably you made it because you wanted people to enjoy it, right? So you have to figure out that part of it at least. And that's hard, right? It's a whole different skill set. It's not a natural skill set for most people to sell stuff, or to figure out how to promote it or to figure out how to get it in front of other people. That's, people go to school for that and they do 20-year careers trying to get good at it, right? It's not easy. So when so I've made a lot of games over the years. And so nowadays before I even start to make a game, I'm thinking about who's the audience for this first. I'm always trying to find out who the audience is. Now, the beautiful thing about online is brought like-minded people together. You can find groups of people with common interest and you can promote for them, right? So I'm always thinking audience first. If you don't know who your audience is, if your audience is you are an amateur game maker making an amateur game, and you should be making it for the love of making the game. And maybe one time in about 100,000, it'll break out. But you're gambling, right? You're playing the lottery. If you're either playing the lottery or you have an actual plan that has a whole bunch of moving parts to it to get from the beginning to the end. And I think that's challenging for most people starting out because they're not motivated to be in business. They're motivated to make games. So it's difficult. And, so the art scene of making games is really strong right now. People making them just for the art. And you see occasionally some of those people break out and actually start going commercial. But I think that the cool thing about our business is, when Dave and I started, we thought, like it was a tiny hobby, really. I remember
so
the first
true.
time a game sold 1 million copies, and I went, "Wow, we're big time now!" Right? And now there's 3 billion gamers worldwide, right? So we already won, is the way I look at it. So when I started the business, we thought, "Oh, boy, this is really cool. It'd be nice if more people did it." Right. And maybe we'll get there, my grandchildren will see it happen or something. And now, we already won. So we won already. Now it's just what do we do? Who are we going to entertain is how I think about it. Who do I actually want to entertain?
It's a really good answer, Gordon. David, I'm curious on your thoughts on it too, about the first steps of partnering and finding the right people. I think Gordon nailed it with the audience being super important of what you're building to. So yeah, go ahead. I'll let you talk. And
I think that finding the right, I was going to echo a little bit about what Gordon said here, but finding the right partner is vital. In fact, I got kind of a funny story about Diablo. Diablo, we pitched it to a bunch of different companies and got rejected over and over and over again because RPGs were dead at the time. And that was kind of the mantra. They weren't selling. And so nobody wanted to pick up a new RPG, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually, we found the right partner who was Silicon and Synapse at the time, but became Blizzard. And they, loved the idea. And then when about halfway through the development, Blizzard came to us and said, we want to make you part of the team, not Condor anymore. We want to make you Blizzard North. And so we were also making games for 3DO, and 3DO said, well, we want you to be part of 3DO. We like you too. And in fact, we'll give you almost twice as much money. And we turned it down because it was about finding that right partner, and the partner that we could build kind of a shared vision with, that was going to be a product that we both believed in, that we thought very much. There were so many companies at the time that were filled with, for lack of better description, business people that they weren't gamers, right? They didn't really even understand games or know games which is just bizarre to me. But and one of the mantras for early Blizzard thing is that we're just a company of gamers, right? And that was like that stood out at the time, because it was so unusual that the entire company, all the management and things like that, were all gamers. And so finding that right partner can be really vital to your success. I think that if you find that right partner that believes in your product, that wants to help you, wants to make sure you succeed, is giving you good advice, things like that, is even more valuable almost than money. Though obviously money, you need it in order to make a product, but if you're choosing between two things where there's maybe a little bit less money but a better, stronger partner, I think that's the wiser choice, just simply because you have to kind of think about what do you think is going to be best for the game, because if you think it's going to be best for the game to go with this other partner in some way, whatever it is, most likely the money will take care of itself better than in a situation where it's all about the money up front and nobody knows what they're doing.
I think you hit it right on the head, because I think the thing that will kill you the most is partnering with the wrong people, because you're literally getting married at some level, or at least getting engaged with a whole bunch of these people that that you end up, whether it's an investor or a publisher or a distributor or even a platform, right? Once you hook your star to them, you're stuck with them for a while. So you need to figure out, okay, is this a relationship I want to be in long term? Because the long term is liable to be longer term than you think it's going to be, right? Yeah. So we've turned down deals and turned down investors multiple times because we look and we say, okay, God, I really want that money. I want that money right now. But what is it actually going to cost me over the lifetime of the deal, right? I don't actually want to talk to that person every month. I don't want to be around that person. It'd be great if they just send the money and go away, but they won't. So, it's really difficult, particularly when you're hurting, to turn a deal down or a partnership down, because it's not going to work out long term. But I think that's really so important, because you can't think of these as just simple transactions. That it's so totally transactional and you're going to get away clean. There's a lot of kind of emotion and cruft around every relationship you have.
Yeah, no, that's a super good point, Gordon. I totally agree. I can only imagine some of the pitches you guys get in terms of money, and then also some of the.
We've gotten some incredible offers, and even John a couple times have gone, wow, that's a lot of money. We should take that deal. And I go, future Todd is going to hate current Todd for taking this deal in about 18 months, because here's how it's going to play out. Here's how it's going to, they're telling you all the stuff you want to hear right now, but here's how they actually operate with people. Are you up for that? If you're up for it, great. If you go in eyes open and you've decided, okay, the transaction is worth the pain is worth the gain, go for it. But if you're trying to fool yourself that there won't be any pain for the gain, then you're going to get yourself in a world of hurt.
Yeah, that makes sense. But poor Todd isn't here to defend himself, but I could totally see that.
Todd talks about future Todd and past Todd all the time.
I know. Yeah, he's a big time maintenance guy, right? He's all about it. So I think we all are big time maintenance guys. So that's great. I'm so curious. This is always one of my favorite questions to ask you guys, especially, is here we are, 2020, absolute nightmare reality scenarios of a pandemic and all the changes going on in the world. But the game industry is a solace for a lot of people. But the game industry is moving forward. I mean, there's consoles coming out in a couple of months. There's changes to how games are launching across multiple platforms. You're seeing huge corporations like Google and Amazon get involved in this world now. I'm so curious where you guys see the 2020s for games. I mean, we've, grew up in the 80s, seeing everything in the 90s changing into technology, and the last 20 years of MMOs has been huge. So I'm curious where you see 2020 to 2030 going, and what that is going to look like, because you see a lot of things. So Gordon, we could start with you and go to David.
Let David go first on this one. I'm interested in hearing what he has to say.
Hype it over. David, go ahead, Dave.
I'm probably going to be a downer, so let David go first.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of 2020 is I don't know how it's going to go. I don't have as good of expectations for the second half of 2020 as I did for the first. And that's mainly because of the situation with, especially here in the US, where the pandemic is really hitting hard. And unemployment's way up. People don't have that, extra cash anymore that they had, at the beginning of the year when they had jobs and things like that. So I see kind of a slowdown coming for the fall. And I think that despite the fact that these consoles are launching, I don't really anticipate a huge sales rush. I also think they're going to be, I don't know at all. I have no inside information, but I think they're going to be expensive, which plays really poorly during this pandemic, in my opinion. And so even though profits were way up in the first couple quarters, I think that the second couple quarters are going to be, there's going to be kind of a downside to it all. I think the other games that might thrive during this time are things that are more, kind of games as a service, free to play type things and stuff like that, that they'll still see really high numbers because people are still looking for things to do. And now that we're kind of quote unquote stuck inside, then people have been turning to games for sure. Where we go after this, we'll see. It's I think that some of the online things like Stadia, that people are talking about, that's like the next horizon for gaming or whatever. And people have tried that before and it didn't work. And I don't know how well Stadia is working still. I don't know if that's really the direction. I don't think that it should be. I think that there's other directions that I think are more important. And I think that just practically, until they solve being able to transfer information faster than the speed of light, which I don't think they're going to, it's going to be really difficult to make that a real reality without any sort of be able to download some kind of executable on the client side, even if it's part of a television or something like that, some device or whatever. As for other things, one of the things that I think is going to become really popular are these other services, sort of like Game Pass on Xbox, where they, it's kind of like, for lack of better description, Netflix for gaming. And I see that as kind of a trend that I believe will grow in popularity, where people will pay whatever it is. I don't know what the services can be, but let's say $10 or $15 a month or something, and they'll be able to try a variety of different games. And I think that kind of service or whatever is going to be is much more of a future direction for the industry than other things, because I think that the prices of games are going to go up, and rightfully so. The fact that the games haven't increased in price in 20 something years is absurd, and the audience has really grown, so profits have been able to keep up or whatever to some degree. But the fact is that with more and more competition and things like that, and higher risks, and with these new systems, more and more cost of making games, it's inevitable that companies are going to have to find new ways to charge more money. And they've already been doing that with, DLCs and all sorts of things like that. But I see more of those kind of things in the future.
Cool. Gordon, you want to go ahead now?
I mean, you're right on, David. I think, the first half was all about, if you had a great game already out, your numbers went up like crazy, right? And because people were looking for escapism and a way to feel good about stuff. So it didn't help anybody who was building the game, but it helped the people who already had a running game. So the bigs got bigger, is what happened in the first thing, and even in the second half. So we're entering a pretty significant economic downturn. Let's just be real about it, right? This may be the biggest thing that's been seen in living memory almost, since most of the people who experienced the Depression are gone at this point. So we're talking about, pretty serious times, catastrophic type of stuff, which will shrink our market at some level. It'll expand it in some ways and shrink it in others. And the challenge is that, our audience is used to very high end stuff that costs a lot of money to build, and our tooling, our ways to build that cheaper and faster hasn't kept up with, how much it costs. And here's the other thing, right? So now that we're all at home, and now everybody has to work virtually, now you're competing with all the people in the world. You're no longer, the fact that you all could come to the office and do stuff, that was a competitive advantage. Now you don't have that competitive advantage, which means you're competing with every other human in the world. And guess what? There's a lot of smart, talented humans all over the world who will work for a lot less money than we will here. So it's a very challenging time, I think, that we're moving into. I think people still need to be entertained. I think that we have this giant palette. Basically every computer in the world has some kind of gaming thing on it, no matter how small or how large. The gaming is everywhere now. So there's lots of different types of games to make. And so you have to kind of look at what category of games are you in, what platforms are you targeting, and how's that gonna play out. Gaming in aggregate is going to be fine, right? But the disruption in the different parts of gaming could be just gigantic, beyond comprehension today. I think there is a trend toward an upscale market that's more expensive, but that's going to be more like the hobbyist market of the 90s is where I see that, right? It won't be for everybody. It won't be like, okay, consoles, the consoles need 100 million people to buy their console for it to work out, right? So they can't sell $500 machines to 100 million people right this moment in time, given the where we're at, right? The middle class is shrinking, and that's not going to help, high end gaming, but low end gaming may take off in a big way.
Yeah, I also think that there's one other thing I was going to mention is that I think that especially on larger scale teams, AAA, that kind of stuff, that we're already seeing kind of the results of this pandemic hitting deadlines, like games getting delayed, things like that. So maybe for the second half of 2020, there may be a small window for indie devs that have been working virtually and have these kind of virtual teams. They had this kind of competitive advantage almost for the short term, where that they may not be able, there may not be as much competition come fall, Christmas time, that kind of area that there normally would be, because of the fact that these gigantic teams couldn't be working and trying to get it set up new ways to operate and new systems for them to kind of is definitely hit their timing. And I know that a bunch of them have fallen behind. And so I think that there may be a small window here for some indie advantage in the very short term.
Well, and I think here's the other thing, right? So we're all remote and we're trying to figure out the whole remote thing, but we're leaning heavily on the culture that we built up when we were together.
Mm-hmm.
Right? As teams evolve over time, people leave, new people come in, you lose that thing that you had before. Does that mean it's going to get better or get worse? I'm not sure, right? You don't know, so most of us who are doing this remote have done some remote work before, but it tended to be stuff that was easier to do that way, not everything. And so we're leaning heavily on the glue that we built up between people when they were together, but that glue is degrading over time. The virtual thing's not super reinforcing of that. So I think that we've got some big challenges for big teams. The smaller teams have a lot of advantages right now, particularly if they're already used to operating in this manner.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Guys, I think that's a great note to end on because it was super positive on the indie side, right? Which is where we were going with the panel. But I mean, this has been fantastic. I can't thank both of you guys enough. I know we talk pretty regularly, but this is going to be really good for people coming into PAX and seeing this for the first time and hearing your thoughts. And luckily PAX is a really good suite of indies that come in and they do a lot to support that program. And I think you said it best, Gordon, when you said, we've reached a level where games are actually being made for art. And I think that speaks volumes to where the industry is at from, watching High Score this week and getting caught up on everything that happened years ago. But, it's interesting to see we've hit this stage of development where, a person can take a laptop and build something. And I think that's huge.
Think about how we democratize development, right?
Yeah.
Literally 100 million people are making games when you get down to it, right? So this is awesome for humanity. I don't want to compete with them all, but it's awesome for humanity.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, 100%, right? It's totally true. So thanks so much, guys. I know Bill Murphy, our producer, is putting this all together. And thanks to Debbie Sue for joining us too. But Gordon, Dave, thanks again. And like I said, Gordon, best of luck with Crowfall going into beta. I'll give you the shout out. It's in beta, so it's a huge milestone for you guys on the indie front. And Dave, obviously success with Greybeard, and I know Skystone is talking to a bunch of indies as well. So it's really exciting to see. So thanks again, guys. And we look forward to, listen, we'll all be in an event soon, hopefully 2021. Which one it is will be fun to figure out. But I think it's going to be a lot of drinks all around when everybody gets back to a show. So thanks again, guys.
Sounds good.
It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.